See, we have the Deputy Mayor of Beaverton with us today.
Yeah, she's real opinionated. I don't know where it came from. So you might hear her chatting around in the background. I think it's from her dad.
Welcome.
She's really
I'm having some problems. I don't know what's going on. Anybody know how I can make my face appear? It's only showing my virtual background. And right here, my camera is on.
What colors are you wearing as clothing? Because sometimes.
Well, I took it off even when I do no virtual background, like non.
Oh, is your camera lens closed?
I push it. No. See, when I touch it, that's my finger making it, but it's not. I know it happened in 2021 once, but I don't remember what I did. But I'm here. And I'm gonna play around. Yeah. Good to see everyone, and good to see the Vice Mayor join us.
She's getting big, Lacey.
Oh.
Yeah, she's wearing this is from the mayor's pack that you guys sent over. These are 6-month jammies.
Okay.
She's so cute. I want to play with her.
Got a very
I'll babysit.
disposition compared to my other daughter. Jump was just like just so easy. Like, this is why people have other children. We're not having any more, but I could see why people sometimes have more than one or two when they're pleasant.
I had my easy one first. So I thought my second one was like a piece, it's like, oh no, total opposite. Total opposite.
Right.
So Chair Bubenik, we do have enough members. Oh, there's Commissioner Fye. It worked. So we do have enough members on for a quorum if you're ready to get started.
All right. Well, welcome everyone to the July 17th Washington County Coordinating Committee meeting. Now go ahead and call this meeting into session. First item on our agenda tonight, I'm so used to tonight. This afternoon is public comments. Do we have any waiting to share thoughts with us in public comments, Stephen?
We did not have anyone who signed up to testify, and it looks like primarily staff and the attendees. But if there's anyone out there that would like to make a public comment now, I'll give a moment to raise your hand if you're an attendee. I'm not seeing anyone at this time, Chair.
All right, then I'll move on to item number 2, introductions, roll call, meeting calendar, and protocol. We have a small change in Wilsonville that Mayor Julie Fitzgerald will become the alternate, and Wilsonville's Council President, Kristen Ackerval, will now be the primary. Although she's unable to attend today, we'll congratulate her next month at our August meeting. A new thing you're going to see on item 2C is Washington WCCC future agenda items. One of the things we were talking about that I think several of our city managers do is publish what's coming on the pipe for work sessions and the like. So what we'd like to do is in 2C is give you all heads up of items that we will probably be discussing in the next few months. It also is a placeholder if someone would like to have something discussed in the next few months, we can add it to that section. Our city manager here at Walton is very good at that. We have a rolling calendar. We know what we're going to be talking about, at least the basics of what we're going to be talking about for about a quarter out. And we were thinking that might be a good thing here so that you can plan vacations or have your staff ready for things that are coming down the pipe that they might want to do a little bit more homework on. So that's just an FYI. And with that, we'll go ahead and start the roll call, Stephen, and we'll get into the meeting.
That's great. Thank you. Okay, as usual, I'll go in order of jurisdiction. So City of Banks, Mayor Jones.
I am here.
Thank you. City of Beaverton, Mayor Beatty, and Deputy Mayor. Thank you. City of Cornelius, I don't think we have Mayor Delane yet. We'll keep an eye out for him. City of Durham, Mayor Sharado, I don't believe has joined yet, so we'll keep an eye out for him as well. City of Forest Grove, Mayor Wenzel, I think I
Here.
saw you. Thank you. Welcome. I just got a message from Mayor Callaway. He'll be running just a few minutes late for Hillsborough. City of King City, Mayor Fender, Vice Chair. I see.
Here.
Thank you. City of North Plains, Mayor Linehan, I believe I saw you.
Here.
Thank you. City of Sherwood, Mayor Rosner.
I am here.
Thank you. City of Tigard, Mayor Lube.
Here.
Thank you. City of Tualatin, Mayor Bubenik.
I'm here. You see, Jeff just joined too.
Ah, excellent. Thank you. And we do not have a Wilsonville representative, as you mentioned, or both Councilor Ackerball or Council President Ackerball and Mayor Fitzgerald had conflicts today. So we won't have a Wilsonville representative. And then for Washington County, Commissioner Fye. Okay.
What's here?
And then I
Yeah,
see
we're
for
working.
Metro, we have Councilor Rosenthal present. Thank you.
Yes.
And I saw Stephanie Turner from ODOT, I believe, is with us. And Tara from TriMet.
I'm here. My
Welcome.
colleague John Sarah will take over partway through. I'll give you all a heads up.
All right, great. Thank you, Tara. All right, Chair, I think that's it.
All right, before we launch in, there's a quick question for Mayor Jones. Saw the fires and banks. What's the status there? You had to shut down 26?
Yeah, they shut down 26. There was a detour set up. They basically had everything done by, that was all Saturday evening. Was that Saturday or Sunday? See,
Saturday.
it was Saturday. Everything has flown together. The fire department continues to go out and hit down hot spots as they erupt, but they said that could be going for as long as a week.
Are
So,
folks back in their homes and stuff?
yeah, no one actually had to evacuate except for the residents that were obviously at that one home. And I didn't get a report on if it was a total loss, but my guess is it was based on how many responses, how many fire departments had to respond to help.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry to hear that. All right. So that brings us to item 3A, consideration of the Washington County Coordinating Committee meeting summary for May 15th, 2023. Does everyone have a chance to review the minutes and noted anything that should be corrected? Not seeing any hands, so do I have a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve the summary.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the summary and discussions on those motions. All those in favor say aye or raise your hands or both.
Aye.
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 Those opposed? Abstentions? Sounds like it was unanimously approved. Thank you. 4A, the 2023 RTP update, spring engagement summary and chapter 7 overview. This will be led by Allie Holmquist of Metro. Welcome, Allie.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen real quick, and then I'll jump right in. Thank you so much for having me back. Today, I'm here to talk about the RTP update, as the chair mentioned. Really, the purpose of today is that I had presented earlier in the spring around some of the outcomes related to our assessment of the project list. And so I'm just going to circle back on closing the loop on that discussion and then talk about the public review period. And that, as illustrated on this next slide, just started last week. And so that's going to be running until August 25th. I can drop the link in the chat. I'm not sure if the direct link was part of your packet, but it does describe all of the different ways you can provide comment. And I have a slide that gets into more detail on that later on in the presentation. But we were able to move forward with that after JPACT and Metro Council gave us direction to go ahead and open public review earlier in the summer. So just talking a little bit about what's in the full draft document, but before I circle back on the outcomes discussion, there is an executive summary. So it's about 40 pages and it's a really good high level summary of the entire document. We anticipate that this will be the main way that community and stakeholders engage with the report, because the larger report is about 500 pages before the appendices. But we're really excited to have that ready for folks to engage with. As far as the chapters, following an introduction in chapter 1, chapter 2 documents the work that we did with JPACT, with TPAC, with all of the committees to adopt these shared goals that really guided the regional transportation plan update. So that really talks about that work that we did together. Chapter 3 is where all the policies live that we've just been discussing and working together on, especially with staff around language over the past couple years. Chapter 4 really is our documentation of needs. So it takes stock of where the region is today and then really gets into those gaps in transportation needs that still exist. Chapter 5 talks about our revenue outlook and forecast. And then chapter 6 is where we do summarize the project list. So a lot of those charts that I was speaking to earlier in spring that sort of summarized, the capital projects and the type of those projects versus the operations and maintenance, you'll see in that chapter, as well as the executive summary. And then chapter 7 is really more about performance of the list. So assessing the list back against those shared regional goals and reporting on the outcomes. And then finally, chapter 8 is really the post-RTP chapter. It's looking forward to the next 5 years of regional priority work that'll be happening before we engage in the next update for 2028. And then, of course, there's a whole bunch of appendices and supporting documents that go with it, even things like locally preferred alternatives that we adopt with the plan to document all the work that we've done and even getting into the weeds with technical data as well. But I want to focus on chapter 7 and measuring outcomes, just to talk about some of the ending results that happened after the spring. So we did, when we talked early in the spring, we had some of the assessment results and we were continuing to do the assessment. And then also we had a point where we were talking about projects and whether or not there were any changes to the list. And so we actually reran the assessment a second time based on updates. There were only small updates to the project list that actually occurred in May. Just a couple that we updated some descriptions or added some safety information that we didn't have detail on to be able to provide more information for the assessment. And so the results aren't much different than what we talked about earlier in the spring, but just as a summary and a reminder, the short list of those is that in most cases, the RTP does make progress towards those shared regional goals, but it does fall short of meeting several target outcomes that we spoke to in spring. One of those, for instance, is we have a goal for performance to triple walking, bicycling, and transit mode share, and that is one that this RTP doesn't achieve. But the region is on track to meet climate targets if state-led actions, including congestion pricing and a vehicle miles traveled road user fee, come to fruition. And the RTP does advance in totality. There might be a few target outcomes that aren't met, but we are moving forward our mobility, equity, and economy goals. One way that we could maximize those is more investment in transit. And then for safety, that was the one place where we did identify the need for more near-term investment to really be meeting those safety targets, particularly on urban arterials. And just to focus on climate a little bit, because we did some additional analysis that was new between when I was last here in spring to now. So we were looking at, you can see on the graph here, the blue line shows the 2023 draft RTP plus adopted plans. That's what that ADP stands for. And so you can see that we do get a little bit more of a greenhouse gas emissions reduction than the 2018 RTP. But it's not hitting that 2045 target for emissions 30% below 2005 levels. So in order to meet that target, we really need to be assuming the assumptions in the statewide transportation strategy, which is the state's blueprint for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, also something that guides our climate targets. And that impact that you can see here is shown in purple when we consider the RTP plus those assumptions, and you get a much more dramatic drop to meet that 2045 target. However, some of the assumptions in that strategy are things like it has throughway pricing currently proposed that's double that's assumed in the regional transportation plan. It also has a variety of other mechanisms to replace the gas tax to help fund the transportation system that have an impact on greenhouse gas emissions because they affect the cost of driving and therefore vehicle miles travel. And so we heard from our discussions with staff that there's really a broad recognition that transportation pricing and revenues need to change further, both to think about how we fund the system and be able to reach our climate targets. And so that was something that we did a little bit more analysis on. We heard interest in thinking about how additional pricing and revenues could be used to proactively benefit the region. And so we did a little bit of additional analysis here. And so now you're seeing targets 1 and 2 show up on this slide. We worked with consultants to design 2 scenarios that could meet the 2045 target in different ways, different visions of the future, different than the statewide transportation strategy, and then 2 different scenarios that are a little bit different from each other. So the first one would use pricing alone to manage demand for driving, and then that's target 1. And then the second one, target 2, uses a combination of pricing and then reinvesting the revenues from that pricing into transit, which is a high impact greenhouse gas emissions reduction strategy. And we know that pricing is critical not only because it's effective at managing demand, but it also raises revenues then that can be used to expand those greenhouse gas emission reduction strategies like transit and active transportation. And so you can see that both scenarios then reach the target, but just get there in different ways, illustrating there are multiple paths to meeting climate targets through a combination of strategies. It allows us to think a little bit about, there's different charges that are assumed in those targets as well. The second one, where we reinvest in transit, is a little bit less. So these just help guide us in thinking about the ways that pricing can maximize benefits to the region as the state looks to implement the statewide strategy. And so that was really the biggest outcome since we last talked in spring. We've also been talking about all of this information that we talked about today and then formally in spring with the public and our partners. So we did a survey, got about 800 or almost 900 survey responses. We held a couple of forums with community leaders, businesses, and then language specific forums as well that drew about 300 people. And then different briefings and presentations to committees and different organizations, as well as some of the federal consultations. And what we heard from that engagement that we talked about at the JPAC Council workshop earlier this summer is really that safety is a top concern. That includes both traffic safety, concerns while walking and bicycling, and a desire for more protected infrastructure, and personal safety around harassment, particularly when, waiting at stations and feeling a little bit vulnerable. We heard that people recognize that we are facing a climate emergency, and there's some concern that some of the major projects, the mega projects, don't do enough to reduce emissions. People are really prioritizing maintenance or wanting to see maintenance prioritized, streets and sidewalks, but also thinking about buses and MACs as well. and more transit service, really thinking about service coverage and frequency in particular to make sure that's efficient, affordable, and accessible. And walking is really emerging as a key priority for those for all abilities as well. And so what we heard in the JPACT discussion is really a recognition that we're at a pivotal moment with challenges related to safety, climate, and affordability. We heard that there's interest in whether there can be more near-term investment in equity and safety on high injury corridors and intersections. We heard interest in more investment to expand travel options in underserved or growing urbanized areas at the edge of the region, thinking about that transit coverage being a more competitive option to driving, and the importance of emphasizing equity in that work. And then also as we think about meeting those regional climate targets. We also heard that state transportation policy and funding changes are needed to give the region more resources, tools, and authority to meet our goals. And future work is really needed to think a little bit more holistically to address housing and transportation affordability and community and business displacement in an integrated manner, specifically coming up around high capacity transit as well. That's something that we actually documented our equitable development strategy work in Chapter 8 to really institutionalize that as part of an outcome from that discussion. And then finally, just a need to take a step back and look at the big picture of how investments work together. So what we had proposed around the changes that could be made to the project list as we did before that additional assessment in later in the summer that we were talking about in May. These are also the same types of questions that we can consider during the public comment period and responding to some of that feedback. So there's still opportunities to update descriptions to specify project features that improve regional goals where there wasn't specificity, but we actually are meeting some of those goals in the features, they're just not described. Thinking about reprioritizing or shifting project timing to accelerate those that invest in safety on and around transit, particularly on high entry corridors, completing gaps in the regional network around walking, bicycling, and transit, and equity, and investing in equity focus areas. And then also finally, just we have some of the bundled buckets that have dollars but not specific locations. And so one way to help with performance and really identifying where those projects are so that they can be assessed. We have, without locations, we have a difficulty assessing those bucket projects. And so they end up not contributing to the assessment. And then finally, I just want to say a couple things about next steps for public review and adoption. So the 45-day comment period that we're in now is really a time where we'll be helping people understand the draft plan, and then staff will be looking through the comments and thinking about how to respond to comments together with our partners through TPAC and the committees as we develop recommendations for consideration for changes that are made in response to those comments. You'll also see on here, there's a number of ways that we are accepting comments from an online survey for community members, comment forums, email, letters by phone. And then we are also, this will be on the next slide as well, but I want to point it out here. There will be a public hearing on July 27th as well as one important key date. And that's something that you'll also see reflected on this slide. One other thing is that between now basically through about September, we're going to be continuing discussions with staff around the mobility policy analysis, the climate analysis. We're talking a little bit about transportation system management as well. Freight delay and commodity movement study. There's some more results around that that'll be coming up. And then also Chapter 8, which is something that JPACT will be discussing a little bit later. So really talking about what is in that post-RTP work plan, as well as reviewing the fall adoption package before we ask for any sort of consideration of a recommendation. And then we are holding then that first reading and hearing for adoption on September 28th with council. And that's before MTAC and MPAC will be asked to consider recommendations in October, before TPAC and JPAC do the same in November, and the second reading and second hearing happen at the end of the month in November. So with that, I'll end here. I'm not Kim. Kim is the best resource for all questions. I'll be happy to answer as many as I can as well. And with that, thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate the chance to come back and be here.
All right, looks like Mayor Berry has her hand up.
I like a clarity question to begin with. Like, what are you hoping is coming out of this information presented to us? Because clearly I have lots of thoughts, but given where we are in the process, is this just meant to be an update?
That's a great question. So because we are in public review, we are at the point where it's less discussion that staff is responding to and more of comments that we're collecting and then officially responding to it. So it's a little bit different than some of the prior meetings. But one of the things that we're hoping to do as part of these discussions and with staff is also helping to elicit and have a discussion to guide comments that would come out of the plan. And there will be some additional discussions, just like there have been in past stages, where any feedback is helpful to help inform some of those discussions at JPACT and some of these other forums.
Okay, well, I have a couple high-level thoughts for you. We're interchanging the word safety, and I get there is a difference between like safety and intersections and personal safety. And I think that needs to be delineated a little bit easier, because one of your comments was, well, we want more transit and high crash corridors to help with safety. Like, what kind of safety are you talking about? Like physical safety, like TriMet police? Or like, what is high crash corridor? And safety to me means like people crossing the road. And so that piece to me, I had a hard time hearing what you said next, because I was trying to fixate on like, what kind of safety were you talking about in that moment? And I think it's really challenging that our ability to reach climate is predicated on the state's ability to do things. We just saw the governor say no tolling right now. So what are we doing? And like, you had a whole slide, and I have 2 master's degree and I couldn't figure out what you were saying with that. And so that to me, if I'm deeply engaged in this process and understanding the mayor of a large city, and I have no idea what that slide meant, when we're soliciting feedback, what are we getting? Because that's a really complicated thing to understand. I would also say that it's challenging to say that all of the revenue collected will go right back into public transit for a city that is a producer of TriMet revenue with very little services. And I think you've heard from this group multiple times that our frustration when it comes to busing and TriMet routes. And I mean, I have both in mind. I'm not even like a Western Washington County mayor. We have both, and they're still very complicated and hard to use. So if that is the solution, my community lives north and south, and it's going to be very frustrated to be paying tolling and not getting services out of it. So those are my initial thoughts.
All right, Councilor Rosenthal.
Thank you, Chair Bubenik. I just have 2 questions or maybe thoughts. The first question is, and maybe this can be answered offline, have we gotten specific comments or specific feedback, or do we expect to get specific feedback from the traded sector regarding their aspect of the economy? Because that involves particularly the freight sector of goods, and you didn't cover that in your other thing. And then regarding safety, I have to admit I'm going to channel Metro Council President Peterson here and say, should we have a program that's going to convert all intersections possible into roundabouts because of their 32-fold increase in safety? And is that addressed someplace in the document? I haven't gotten through all of it yet. It's quite a massive undertaking.
Thank you, Councilor. Regarding the first question, we did go out to the business community in a couple different ways. I think the way that we did small business engagement through some of our forums, but I think what you mean is some of the larger employers. So we had actually a forum that was co-sponsored by the Portland Business Alliance, where we spoke with major employers. We've also been reaching out to, like I have been at the Washington County Chamber Transportation Task Force several times to talk about both the high capacity transit strategy and the regional transportation plan. So we have been engaging with the business community in a number of ways. And then the freight strategy is another way that we've been having some of those conversations. That's being led by Tim. It's a similar separate but complementary effort as that, like the high capacity transit strategy is for the RTP. And I know he's going to be coming actually to the staff WCCC TAC soon. So that might be something that you're hearing more about as soon as well. So there's been quite a few, and actually that will be going to some of the committees in more detail as well. So that's a number of ways that we've engaged with the business community. As far as the program to turn intersections into roundabouts, currently I don't know how much. That's not, as far as I know, that's not a policy in the RTP currently. I'm not sure how much the policies, support that would fit into the policies that are in the chapter. So that might be something that we could have Kim talk to you a little bit more about offline. There is still some work though being done around the mobility policy overall, and some discussions that are still happening that we'll have more information about soon.
Thank you.
Commissioner Fye.
Thank you, Chair Bubenik. Ali, great presentation. And the question I have is actually Washington County staff question, which is around the engagement and the summer engagement and the comments that was received being from a particular segment of the Portland metro area. And just wanted to ascertain perhaps ask the question, what are the plans to sort of get specific comments from Washington County residents, and specific for Washington County, because currently that isn't the reality. So if you have any thoughts or some game plans that you could share with us, that would be really greatly appreciated.
Yes, thank you so much, Commissioner. That's a great question. One of the problems with some of the surveys, well, they, provide a different avenue for people to be able to engage, because you don't have to show up in person. Sometimes those don't have the same location specific reach that we do with the in-person or location specific events. So we are going to, we have a survey that actually is part of the public comment period, again, to go out to the broader public. We are trying again to work, we graciously asked our partners in Washington County to share as much as they can. So I know that they have already sent out some information and are going to help us boost with newsletters and some of the ways that we are a little bit more challenged at our regional scale. One of the other ways that we, though, are trying to be more targeted, because we still have trouble, we can advertise locationally specific, but still that doesn't guarantee responses, is that we are still working with community-based organizations from across the region, but making sure that we are engaging folks in our different counties. And so that includes Centro Cultural, that we've been engaging with throughout the process. And so we still have that contract through the public review period, and we'll still be holding those more community and location specific workshops to make sure that if we still have gaps, for instance, in this next survey, regardless of how much we try to promote, that we are hitting that in other ways. And then there will be some of the consultation that will help get at certain groups as well. So it'll be a mix of maybe trying to see if we can get a little bit more word out about the survey to fill that gap, and then also doing some targeted outreach.
Mayor Lube, you're up.
Thank you, Mayor Bubenik. Thank you for the presentation. I'd like to make a couple of general comments. I think out of just broad frustration based on the information that we have and the goals. In the document, it says by every safety measure, the RTP tracks, the region's streets are getting less safe. And in our comments, safety is a top priority, walkability is a top priority. And it shows that, you know, our vehicle network is nearly complete, but other networks are significantly farther behind, and pedestrian deaths are a big deal, and we're not on target, and the money's just not being invested, I think, enough in those safety concerns. And I also I want to vocalize that it's incredibly disappointing to see on paper that we have targeted fatalities of 52 people, and worse yet, the actual is 93. Like, I don't feel like any sort of deaths is a targeted acceptable range, and we need to focus on moving more towards investments that, you know, bring that down and really focus on the safety that everybody says is their top priority. So I just wanted to make that comment.
Mayor Callaway.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Happy Monday, everybody. Ali, thank you. Great job. And this may be a irrelevant question, but as I look at the target scenario results, and I think of how Metro's population growth, you know, predicts 500,000 more people in the Tri-County area. Are those people factored into the 2045 target scenario, so that, you know, because we're looking at per capita. So have we added 500,000 people to, you know, to I guess to the variable out to 2045 if we're looking at population, and then also recognizing that EVs are more prevalent, and I assume they will continue to be, you know, then the VMT doesn't matter as much with greenhouse gases because there's more ICE cars off the road. And so again, maybe that's not germane to what's here today. And if so, that's fine. We can talk later at an impact meeting or something on the side, but I was just kind of curious with those two thoughts and questions.
Thank you, Mayor. No, those are very, very relevant. We are considering growth, so we're using the 2045 horizon year in our climate analysis, like we do for the regional transportation plan. And some of the scenarios, we do a little bit of tweaking with some of the assumptions, which you alluded to in the some of your other comments as well. And that's where we got some of those different types of target 1, target 2, to be thinking about how we meet the greenhouse gas emissions target. But growth is a factor. And one of the things that is included is there is an assumption that's made about the number of electric vehicles. We have to demonstrate consistency with this statewide plan. So those are what we tend to take. We model our assumptions around those pieces on the same assumptions made by the state. So the proportion of the fleet that's electric vehicles, the sort of clean fuels based on some of the rules that are statewide. We looked at the state for guidance there, and we're following, we're basically making the same assumptions. And so some of the levers that we're pulling in some of those different scenario analyses to think about what the future could look like are a little bit more limited. We're focusing more on, you know, the potential pricing, like, you know, ranges of pricing, if more versus less, and then revenue reinvestment if you then thought about how you could reinvest that money, and if it looked a little bit different, how basically the outcomes would change. And so those are the levers that we're pulling in some of those scenarios, then getting into some of the sort of fleet or fuels assumptions. There's a few others. There's like pay as you go, pay per mile insurance and things like that, that we look to the state for as well.
Any other questions for Ali? Quick thing, I just want to follow up on Commissioner Fai's comment about public outreach and public comment. Summer to me is the easiest time to get public comment because there are lots of festivals, there's lots of public events. Back when Washington County was taking MISTIP on the road, they actively went out to every event, major event in the cities in Washington County, was able to compile a great deal of public comment on MSTIP. So I would encourage Metro to do that. you're just going to hear from the same old folks via an opinion poll or survey on a website. Folks, especially some aren't paying attention to this stuff. Where you're going to get their attention is having grab bag stuff, having a booth at different events throughout the summer, and attracting people to come on over and talk to you and explain it. So I just encourage Metro to do the same. So, you know, like I said, Washington County did a terrific job on that. They had quite a few people, for example, Aviva Tualatin, which is coming up next week. They had a lot of people come over into something as dry as M-STEP, but they got people involved and they got comments. And that's when Metro, relying on a survey, it doesn't work. You're going to get the same people. Plus, it's a pain in the butt to find it. And then people get halfway through and they get bored with it. It's easier just to have it, you know, a one-to-one conversation with someone at a festival, a fair, or an event. I see Mayor Lanahan's up, hand it up. You got the garlic festival.
Exactly. Allie, thanks for the presentation. I appreciate that. My comment is really, you know, I mean, it kind of goes hand in hand with some of the outreach, but being a community where we have a large workforce housing for the Portland metro area, a lot of our residents drive into the metro region for employment and entertainment and that sort of thing. And although we might not be on your radar, you know, per se, I still think that it might be valuable to be able to hear the voices from Western Washington County, from North Plains and Banks. So maybe that survey that goes out, you know, maybe figure out how you might be able to target our two communities, because I'm sure that Stephanie Jones also has a large number of folks in her community that actually transit into the Portland metro area for work and play. Thank you.
Commissioner Rosenthal, Council Rosenthal, your hand back up or no?
Yeah, I did raise it one more time. If we have just a second. Thank you, Mayor. Just a question for Ali. One of the funding mechanisms going forward, and I haven't reviewed that chapter because I didn't have the draft, is having to do with the VMT, the vehicle mile tax, as opposed to the vehicle mile travel. My understanding is that a committee about 6 years ago came up with the amount and the amount of monies that would be generated by this VMT statewide. Are those fixed numbers and are those presented anywhere, or is that something we're still waiting on ODOT for? Where could I find that? In other words, they must have made some projections based upon the Orgo project. I'm not sure.
Thank you, Counselor. That's a great question. I actually don't know the answer to that one. I think I will make sure to reach out to Kim and Elliot on that one, because I am not sure that I have heard the latest either, and want to make sure that we get the latest information. Apologies that I'm not able to answer today or right now, but we'll make sure to get more information on that.
Yeah, I've asked that and I haven't gotten a specific answer, but it seems like that if that number is there and if the state already made those estimates, that would be rather critical in our funding estimates.
Mayor Delane.
Sorry, I had to click multiple unmutes there. Hey, I saw a lot of communication, digital stuff. My concern is not doing the outreach into the general populace, having been through this loop multiple times, unlike some of my fellows here. We had hours of testimony, multiple, we blew up the entire Clackamas County chamber, plus they had people in a remote area. And I know we had this previously when we had these done in person in the evenings. Washington County, it blew up the area there too. I'm wondering, is there a possibility that we're going to actually have some in person for the John Q public that are like days or nights or weekends where people can get in and give us feedback on this in this 45 days?
Thank you, Mayor. That's a great question. Right now, most of the avenues are digital. You're correct. It is the days, nights, weekends tend to be more of the comment form, the survey, email, phone, so multiple avenues, but not those in person. The main in person that's on this list is really that public hearing. There will be the different conversation at the committees, but those will most likely, those are still all virtual as well. So right now we are really relying on that digital communication. I think one thing that could be helpful, because I'm hearing that same interest from folks in this group. One of the things that is going out, if for comment, has been the HCT strategy. I also really enjoyed getting to tag team with TriMet for tabling events and being able to go across the county. So if you do have some suggestions for events, or if your staff do, that we should be attending. I don't know about for our communications team exactly what their plan is, but it might be something that we can incorporate, especially if I'm able to go out for HCT, we could talk about both. So I would be interested in hearing exactly what you're thinking as far as those events.
And well, I've still got the floor for a moment. Maybe an understanding of, because I heard you use one of my favorite congestion pricing. Is that the assumption of the elimination of those trips, or that we would push those trips off of the highways onto the arterials and collectors? Because I'll toot the same horn that the staff helped me with. Arterials and collectors are 6 times less safe than people on highways. So my concern is if we're not doing the right things to make the highways efficient and effective, then we're going to Mayor Loob's point, we're going backwards in safety, right? We shouldn't be projecting 92 deaths. Maybe we should be projecting 200 deaths to get people's attention. Because if we take them off the highways, your accidents are 6 times more likely to be involved in one on the arterial or collector than the highway. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. That is a great question. For this analysis using Vision Eval, it is not, we don't have the, and it's the tool that we're required to use for climate analysis by the state. We don't have the same level of that fine grain that we do with the model, the travel model, to be able to look at location specific patterns. So it's more of an aggregate. It's more like sensitivity testing. So while I do know that there was some good news about some of the initial modeling related to diversion with some of the assumptions in the RTP around pricing, with this tool, we weren't able to see those details. I don't know yet about some of the additional analysis that we're doing with the travel model that we're working closely with ODOT on to get more details, but we should have some more soon. But in this case, we're not able to tell that from this tool.
Okay. Mayor Rosner.
Thanks, Allie, for the presentation. A lot of great information. I just want to pound the nail on the communication side again, especially out here in Washington County. Sorry about that. The survey, I've gone through the survey and I've sent it out to some folks to get some feedback on it, and it's really long. There's actually a section where it requires you to read some documents. And the way I think about it, if we're going to use digital as a way of getting feedback from people, we have to keep it short. We have to keep it compatible with their busy lifestyles, and I just don't think that the current survey is going to get you a lot of good information. To others' points, it's going to be the same old people, the people that have a passion about this, but we really need to hear from everybody, in all walks of life, and we need a survey that maybe a companion survey that's shorter, more to the point, and is more asking questions about, what's missing, what's right in their community in terms of connectivity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I would highly recommend that we put something out that's easier to consume. It takes less than a minute to take the survey. So more people will actually provide feedback.
Steven.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a pitch too, I think, to Allie. We're at the county, we'll be happy to help. I know we'll be tabling at a number of events around the county during the summer. So we're happy if you have information that we can share. And I'm sure maybe checking in with the TPAC members, they can probably help facilitate with getting the word out as best we can here too. So thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Stephen. That'd be wonderful.
Is there anything else for Allie? Well, thank you, Allie, for joining us today. All right, that brings us to item B, tolling Nexus project list development. As you all know, myself and Commissioner Fye are on the RTAC. I'm representing the WCCC. Do I have enough C's in there? And Commissioner Fye is representing the commissioners. With the change in tolling and the pause in tolling, ODOT has come up with the idea of a Nexus project list. They're asking the folks at the RTAC table, the cities that are involved, to come up with a list of projects that would help diminish or decrease the amount of diversion as an impact due to tolling. And so Jessica will do a quick summary of what's going on, and then I'm going to ask Commissioner Fye and myself will give you the non-staff version of what we feel is going on with ODOT RTAC versus what the staff is going to present. Jessica, you're on.
Okay, thank you, Chair Bubenik. Next slide, please. So just to provide some background to set the stage for this, and also I wanted to say that Erin Doyle is also here, and we're both been staffing RTAC on the staff side, so she can jump in on questions and comments as well. So we're a little bit behind Clackamas County. For those of you that have been paying attention to the I-205 toll project, Clackamas County has been talking about these things a lot. And then recently at the Regional Toll Advisory Committee, ODOT asked the group to start discussing a process to develop and refine a Nexus project list at their June 26th meeting for both I-5 and I-205 tolling. So this is kind of a change from what RTAC had been focusing on solely with I-205 to include the I-5 and I-205, which is the Regional Mobility Pricing Project. That's also a hard one to say, also called RMPP. So ODOT has said Nexus projects should complement the I-5 and I-205 tolling projects. Nexus projects will be in addition to projects like the required by NEPA. So when you do a NEPA analysis for a federally funded project like this, they'll identify impacts that have to be mitigated. So these Nexus projects will be in addition to those that will be identified through NEPA. We have a lot of questions still because we haven't been talking about this much. We don't have any modeling yet on the RMPP. So we don't know what the congestion impacts or diversion impacts will be. We have a lot of questions about whether toll revenue funding will be used to pay for Nexus projects, whether there will be toll revenue sharing with local jurisdictions to prioritize and fund Nexus projects, which all goes into questions about the purpose for the Nexus project list. It's a very short timeline, which I will go through in just a minute. And so on the staff level, Erin and I have been working with our regional partners at Clackamas County, Multnomah County, PBOT, Metro, TriMet, and we are still continuing to work and coordinate sort of on two parallel paths where we will continue asking these questions and asking for more information, but also we will be working with your staff to start developing the Nexus project list in anticipation of the process that ODOT has laid out. So more information to come. We'll be back in August with hopefully more details on proposed Nexus projects and more answers. So for now, we need your feedback on the proposed Nexus project definition and the proposed selection criteria. And that is what RTAC is going to be asked to finalize at their July 24th meeting. Next slide, please. This is showing the proposed timeline. And so as many of you have been involved in many regional processes, you can see this is very, very short. So we just started talking about this at the June 26th RTAC meeting. And then at the July meeting, they'll be finalizing the selection criteria. And then the call for projects is basically the month of August. So we have a couple weeks to get going on this and develop this project list. And then later in the fall, RTAC is anticipated to refine the Nexus project list. And then this PTS projects, you may have heard of that, is public transportation strategy projects. And that is separate from the Nexus projects. And those are focused on transit. Next slide, please. So to start with, let's go through the definition for proposed Nexus projects. And we're looking for feedback on this. Do you agree with this proposed definition? And do you have any suggested edits or questions? So Nexus projects are roadway, bike, pedestrian, or other mobility projects or programs that could complement a tolling system on I-5 and I-205 in the Portland metro area by addressing an anticipated negative impact, or improving access to public transportation, or improving mobility options near the tolled highway. And, so the and is important, providing access to opportunity or addresses transportation-related disparities and barriers experienced by toll projects' equity framework communities. So I'll pause here, and if anyone wants to provide any feedback now, or we can continue on and you can provide feedback at the end.
I would say go through it, Jessica, because I feel most folks are just not going to have not been prepped on this much.
Yeah, okay.
I'd say this is more a primer for them to go back to their staffs and submit this questionnaire back to ODOT with responses. So go ahead and continue going through it. So you can get the wheels in motion in people's heads.
Sounds good. Next slide, please. And actually, I should say that there was a survey to RTAC members and staff, supporting staff, asking about these. So we have already submitted responses to this, and so has Clackamas County and Multnomah County and other partners. But we can always provide more input to ODOT, and also your two RTAC members here can take it to the June 20 or the July 24th meeting. This map is showing the corridor definition that is included in the Oregon Highway Plan. And so if ODOT uses this definition to define what projects are within a corridor, it's generally 1 mile from the facility. So we might be providing some feedback on this, such as, well, some parallel projects might be further than 1 mile, or some projects might be not exactly parallel, but providing access to a parallel project. So some projects might not meet this exact definition, and we may be providing feedback on that. Next slide, please. So I'll just go quickly through the proposed selection criteria. We have a lot of questions about the proposed selection criteria from the technical side, just because we haven't seen any metrics yet. So we have the criteria, we just don't know how ODOT is anticipating to measure any of these. So it's kind of difficult to propose the Nexus projects without these additional details of how they'll be measured. So again, we'll just be asking those questions again as we go through this process. So the criteria include project readiness, so whether it's included in a plan already, addresses a safety need, improves reliability and supports congestion relief for traffic operations, the urgency of the need for the project, whether it contributes to vehicle miles traveled reduction or greenhouse gas emission reduction, whether it connects to or expands access to public transportation or complements a public transportation strategy project. Next slide, please. Whether it provides benefits to the community, economy, and environment, whether the proposing jurisdiction owns the facility or has support of the owner of the facility, whether it's within an impacted corridor, so that goes back to that map defined by the Oregon Highway Plan, or in a metro mobility corridor, whether the project could leverage existing or future funding opportunities, and then some questions about project cost for development, construction, long-term maintenance. Next slide, please. For next steps, so July 24th, next Monday, the RTAC meeting will be finalizing the Nexus project selection criteria. We haven't seen the agenda yet. We don't know what else is on the agenda, but we can definitely assume that the definition and the selection criteria will be part of the discussion. July 31 through September 4th is anticipated to be the call for projects. And then we have an August 3rd WCCC TAC meeting where we will be talking about a draft Nexus projects list with your staff. And then we will bring that to the August 14th WCCC meeting. And then in September, our TAC is anticipated to discuss submitted projects based on the selection criteria. And then in October, they will refine the Nexus and public transportation strategy project list. Next slide. And here's the contact for myself and Aaron. And now I'd like to turn it over to Chair Bubenik and Commissioner Fye to give their perspective from the RTAC table. And then we're open to questions.
Commissioner Fire, do you want to go first? You want me to go first?
You can go first, Mayor Bubenik, Chair Bubenik. But I wanted to just for Jessica to go back on the first slide, the definition. And if you don't mind, I appreciated what the mayor said around this as being a primer. Could you prime us all about the "and"? I know you called it out, but I don't think you qualified that. So the conversation we talked about the significance of what that is, the "and".
Yep, definitely. That's a good question. One more slide. Oh, one more. Yeah, here. So here where the "and", so that qualifies it. So a project would have to do one of these three things, either address an anticipated negative impact, improve access to public transportation, or improve mobility options near a tolled highway facility. And it would have to be in a toll project equity framework community. So if it's not within one of those areas identified as an equity framework community, it wouldn't qualify. So just something to consider when you're thinking about the definition. I think there's a couple of different ways to think about it. One is whether we want to just make sure our investments in Nexus projects and other things are focused in equity framework communities, or if we want to make sure investments are addressing all facilities that are impacted by diversion, regardless of whether they're in equity framework communities or not. Or maybe our feedback is, if it's an equity framework community, maybe that's prioritized higher than others. These are just things for you to consider, but I just wanted to highlight that that's an "and", not an "or". And I'm not sure that we have a map of the equity framework communities. Aaron was just asking me that to share right now, but that could be something we could bring back or send out separately.
Thank you, Jessica. I wanted you to, I think people to keep in mind if it says "or" and what that could mean for especially some of our cities that are not, within or may not qualify for, because we're limiting ourselves in definitions. But Mayor Bubenik, I think you have much more opinion about this than me, and our board hasn't weighed in on this issue other than to say, to put it in the wheelhouse of the technical staff and to say, make sure the definitions and the criteria, specifically the selection criteria, the process yields the most significant investment for Washington County. So other than that, keeping an eye on that, I don't really have anything to add. Sorry, I've got a few people working with me today.
All right.
Those office partners, they're hard to control, aren't they?
My goodness gracious. Yes, Mayor.
All right. As Commissioner Fye is saying, with my Clackamas hat on, Clackamas has been, in the forefront of this quite a while. There's concerns why this is coming up. ODOT doesn't have the money barely has the money to do the bridge. We all saw that the OTC went with Plan B, that the Abernathy Bridge is the only thing that's going to be tolled and fixed, that tolling on 205 to build additional lanes is indefinitely paused. because ODOT just cannot pull it off. And so the frustration we have, well, why are you asking for a project list where you have no money? I mean, you're just barely going to be able to pay for the bridge. How are you going to pay for these lists of projects that are going to span from Oregon City to Tualatin alone in 205? They're going to be in the multi-millions of dollars. And then if RMPP becomes reality, you're talking all of I-5 from Wilsonville to Portland. So we're probably up to billions at this point. Where's the money for this? We've never even talked money yet. You know, ODOT submitted the revenue projections and to the OTC. We had 36 hours to look at that before it was, you know, the governor, the OTC, we voted on it and gave it to the governor. The cities that comprise of Clackamas County have been asking for that for 3 years. And the only time they only released because they had to, because Governor Kotek said I have to have the financial plan on my desk by May 1st. So there's the finance question. And as Jessica mentioned, there's no modeling on RMPP. What are the impacts going to be on the I-5 corridor if they do congestion pricing on all of I-5 and 205? So how can we possibly come up with a list of projects when we have no idea what the impact's going to be? The third thing that we've came up with is that multiple cities have already concluded their RTP, and none of these projects are included in their RTP. So in order to get these funded and even projected to be if they're valid projects, you have to reopen your RTP, or like we are, Tualatin, we're just starting our RTP or update. And you know, how do we know these projects are going to be worth the, you know, the bang for the buck? You know, we might come up with a great project list, but is it going to fix the issue? We don't know. So why are we spending our time doing this? There are several members who consider this just a distraction from ODOT. You know, just because this is something that came up after the pause was announced by the governor, that ODOT and Director Strickler had a listening session. And there was a talk about, you know, can we discuss projects that will, you know, help us deal with diversion? I don't think anyone anticipated this whole Nexus project list coming up so soon when we haven't even figured out how, like I said, how we're going to pay for it, revenue sharing, will they share revenues? There's also the question of ODOT has committed to re-looking at the idea of all lanes 24 hours a day. That we're going to look at and have modeling done of a free lane, 2 free lanes, you know, the different gyrations of that all the lanes won't be, you know, priced. And if that does happen, what's the impact on diversion with that? The assumption is diversion will be tremendously less to those folks who want to pay for the priority of maybe a paid lane, express lane will do that, while the other folks, you know, stay in the 2 free lanes. What's going to happen then? We don't know yet. So there's just lots of questions about why now, why this list. We're going to spend 3 months looking at this, and is this just going to sit on the shelf because there is no money? You know, one big project that was proposed by Metro President Peterson was, you know, the 205 Abernathy Bridge is the only game in town to cross the river east-west. Don't we need another bridge that's free and maybe make the Abernathy the paid version? There are no alternatives when you get to 205 for east-west transit. Is that the project? And if you're looking at that's the project, that's a crap ton of money. That, you know, where is it going to come from? So those are the thoughts. Like Jessica saying, we're meeting on Monday. What's frustrating is there's no agenda. We'll get the agenda probably Thursday or Friday. They do this all the time. So we are scrambling over the weekend to respond to what ODOT has decided to put on the agenda. They were supposed to be conferring with Commissioner Fye, with Lynn Peterson and Commissioner Savas on agendas, and they're not doing that. So there's still a little bit of frustration on this. I don't know if Commissioner Fye would like to say anything else, but it's frustrating to me because I'm like, why am I going to have my engineers and county staff spend a lot of time on a project list that's just gonna sit in a binder. Because there's no way they're gonna be able to pay for it. And if you go into that 1 mile corridor, notice that 99W is not within a mile of I-5. That's gonna be one of the biggest bypasses and diversion route is 99W and 99E. They're not within the 1 mile corridor of I-5. But we all know that's where people are gonna go. So, Commissioner Fye, would you want to weigh in or take a pass?
Yeah, I don't think, go help Adam. Yeah, I think you summarized it very well, Mayor, and I appreciate you wearing your, I think, switching the hats for Clackamas County cities you represent, I think, but for Washington County, I think, the board, other than to say, what are we, pausing while we focus on this Nexus project, we haven't really had in-depth conversations. And I think the point you raised around agendas not being the last 2 months, I think, yeah, you're right. The June and July, we haven't had that agenda development. And I think Brendan sent an explanation of that, but yeah, I don't, not passing and also not a firm stand, because I wouldn't want to misrepresent the Board of Commissioners on this important topic. But appreciate your comments and well heard.
Because put my Washington County hat back on, I would be terrified if I was Mayor Fender or Mayor Luke. RMPP comes, 99W is crushed beyond what it is now.
Right.
And so that's why it's important for Washington County to weigh in on all the diversion routes people are going to take to get around I-5.
Yeah.
And that's, that's my backyard, that's King City's backyard, and that's Tiger. So that's why hopefully your staff has time to look at this and respond back, if you haven't yet, to ODOT.
Yeah, no, I think the staff are on top of it, Jessica. And in fact, actually, Chair Harrington is my alternate for the RTEC, but I think we're both having a scheduling conflict in placement. I think potentially Jessica will be sitting in for me and presenting Washington County's board's perspective or Washington County's perspective around this Nexus project. So well heard.
Forgot to include Mayor Rosner, but his hand is up. But yeah, Mayor Rosner, 99W's in Sherwood too. So, and if this starts at the Coon Bridge, they're going to find ways.
Yeah.
But Mayor,
yeah, I wish the corridor definition seems to be a bit problematic, but that is the here, nor there. But I think we need to stay on top of this so we can get the most investments. And to also make sure that whatever investment we identify doesn't get shelved. I hear you. So many reports are shelved.
Mayor Rosner.
Thank you to both of you for this update and the presentation. Just a comment. Everything you said, Frank, I had a list of questions and comments, and you just ticked off everyone as I went through that. Why now? Is this the end all be all list? I mean, we don't even know what the tolling environment's going to look like, and it seems very premature that we're even having these conversations at this point, other than just conceptually. The corridor is extremely problematic. Sherwood, I'm very concerned about the 99 West and the impacts in Sherwood. So yeah, I'm basically saying I support your efforts. So thank you.
Councilor Rosenthal.
Thank you, Mayor. I have to add a sort of a larger comment. One of the things that occurs to me, and I understand that the legislature directed them to look at I-5 and on I-205, but the throughway system in our region operates as a concerted whole. In other words, as you pointed out, what affects, if you toll one area, you're going to affect the other. Our Metro did the regional pricing study and said that it's like squeezing water. If you squeeze it in one place without squeezing it every place, it's going to come out someplace else. So we're going to have effects. We can't really avoid 405. We can't avoid I-84. We can't avoid Highway 26. We can't avoid 99W. So this list, if it comes out, it's still going to be, to me, or it seems, is going to be only a preliminary idea without addressing some of the larger things, 213, for example. So it's a larger issue than just looking at these two corridors, it seems to me. And so I guess I would be, if I was on these committees, I would be equally frustrated.
Mary Lou.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you have to say. I also just want to add the 1 mile buffer for that part really frustrates me in general, because I think about, like, for myself, if I were to try to avoid, I-5 tolling, I'm not going to get within 1 mile of I-5 and then veer from there. Like, I'm going to completely change where I'm going from my house. And so if you're only focusing on that 1 mile, it's not going to take into account all of the different roadways that we're going to use to get where we're going without actually going on I-5. And so I have a lot of challenges with that 1 mile definition.
Okay. Mayor Fender.
I just wanted to pipe up and just say I completely agree, and I won't belabor the point, but I just wanted it on the record. We share all of the same concerns, and thank you, Frank, for raising all those.
Sure. Mayor Rosen, you got your hand back up, or?
I do. I just a quick question, kind of the bigger picture. If Julie Parish is successful with IP4, is there, and that's the no tolls without votes proposition that's out there. Is there any conversation going on about Plan B? Because if that gets on the ballot, it will pass.
Now, when I was down in Salem, when we were lobbying hard to get the pause, that was brought up, and people just are hoping that they figure this out, and that the process stalls, if you will, or that changes are made that people will accept maybe the bridge for the Abernathy because they can see the value for that, but not for RMPP. But there is no plan B. We brought that up, that what are you going to do when you have no toll revenue, and it's going to have to go to the vote, and we were just stared at.
Yeah, because I think that's something we need to be talking about too, that they need to start looking at a Plan B, because I think it's a high probability that petition will pass.
That plus in our conversations with Representative McLean, they have this grand plan, if you will, of a new transportation package for the 2025 session. That's going to be a multi-million-dollar, basically take care of all these worries we have, and how toll collection money will be distributed to the state to fix things, the metro area specifically. And Susan McLean and all the transportation folks are saying, trust us, wait till 2025. We have a package that you're going to love, where cities and counties will get all this money to fix any impacts that happen because of tolling.
Yeah.
I took that with a grain of salt, just like you are.
Anyways, thank you.
All right. Jimmy's your hand back up, or? All right, Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to note we're running a little bit behind schedule, so I think we're drawing to a close here. I just wanted to kind of reiterate as we close this. So the county staff perspective is we're going to continue pursuing the development of a list of projects, working with all of our partner cities here. We're always stronger together. And then we also want to continue as a regional team of staff, continuing to sort of press ODOT for a little bit more clarity around process and just where this all may be going. So we'll be pursuing both of those tracks. So do appreciate all the great feedback here today too. Thank you.
Mary Delane, you got 30 seconds.
Yeah, I'll chime in on one point that I wanted to reiterate. I'm not sure how we affect, and maybe Stephen can help us understand that. I think about my literal use, right? My literal use. I go down to Cabela's. Well, I won't be taking the 217 to I-5 to get to Cabela's. I'll go through the back country. I won't be going to Sunday football in downtown Portland with my buddies via 26 to 405 to I-5. I will be going Barnes to Burnside. So how do we comprehend not the parallel, but the trip completely diverted off the highway system into the residential or collector or arterial system. So I'd ask that one. And then I think I would be remiss not to say that several things I've heard from discussions is, well, VMT is the answer to everything, and everybody I talked to, based on the DMV's recent massive data breach, is unwilling to let the state have access to their credit cards or their bank accounts because the state has already proven an inability to keep it secure. 3.5 million people breached all of our personal data by our government. It's not the first one, but ODOT's is one of the biggest of recent. So I think those are some of the concerns. So thank you.
All right. So Stephen said we're falling a bit behind and want to give Erin her full time to say what's what in Salem and the feds and stuff like that. Welcome, Erin.
Hi, thank you, Mayor/Chair Bubenik. You know I can talk fast, so you don't always have to give me my full amount of time. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Erin Doyle, the Senior Government Relations Manager for Washington County. My portfolio of work covers a huge swath of what the county does, but I'm focusing here today on land use, transportation, housing, and economic development. Just out of if I tried to go over all of session, there's not enough time in the world. Next slide, please. So I pulled this quote from OPB because this was, I consider it a record-setting for challenging sections. And I've been doing this since 2013 when we created a parallel urban growth boundary system, expansion system for areas outside of Metro. That was easier than this session, which is saying something. It started off with grand plans to move quickly, to move definitively towards some solutions on some big picture problems. But by the end, we were lucky we came out with a state budget. And so next slide, please. That was reflected in almost 3,000 bills being introduced. These are rough estimates because none of my systems exactly track everything perfectly. About 600 bills were passed this session, so they did manage to get some stuff done. We're just not 100% certain what all of it was, which is super fun and exciting for a lobbyist who has to report out to about 17 different folks in order to tell them what happened to them. So what happens every long session is the state's biennial budget is set. That is the only requirement for odd number year legislative sessions. That budget is set. It's always possible to reform it over the intervening months. And then in the short session, they do budget recalibrations or whatever. There's also the emergency board to make investments. But really what is supposed to happen in a long session is the state's budget is supposed to be established for the next the next 2 years. So that biennium. And they did that barely. And at the last minute, as far as legislative process goes, 7 hours before the constitutional deadline of midnight of June 25th of this year. So came down to the wire, very challenging, a lot happening, many moving parts. So my overall assessment is going to focus in on a couple of tight areas. So next slide, please. First, talking transportation. You guys just talked about some of the tolling ramifications of what came out of this session. There was no bill specifically that ended up moving, but because of the amount of legislative scrutiny, particularly out of the Clackamas County delegation, the governor took it upon herself in consultation with ODOT and the legislature to go ahead and put a pause on the collection of tolls anywhere that's new. So the old tolls are on the Bridge of the Gods, et cetera, will continue. And also taking IBR out of that pause as well, because gotta pay for an interstate bridge somehow, and tolling has always been part of that project specific tolling between Washington, the state of, and the state of Oregon. So that tolling conversation, as you can see, has gotten nowhere. Much more, there's not been a ton more of transparency from regional partners. Washington County is stepping in with everyone else in that process. So in addition to what RTAC is doing and what you just discussed, there's also going to be an interim legislative committee called the Transportation Planning Subcommittee Planning is perhaps a misnomer because they're really supposed to focus in on tolling and how they're going to meet the expectations of House Bill 2017, passed in 2017, that had those three major bottlenecks within the region, and how they're actually going to get to progress on Rose Quarter, 205 and the Abernathy Bridge, since they are managing to get 217 done, which is a relief that we are not yet part of this tolling conversation on our state highways. The other big thing that came down to a last minute push was the interstate bridge replacement financing. The state of Oregon needs to come up with a plan to have $1 billion to put towards the estimated costs of the I-5 bridge replacement, shortened as IBR. They found a way forward. There was a lot of conversation about what types of funding should be used, but they basically bonded against $250 million in general fund, which is usually not how we pay for infrastructure costs. That's usually put up against the lottery or some other dedicated revenue source. That is not the general fund of the state. But in order to have our matching funds on the books, so when we go out as a true state applicant to the federal government to pull down those federal resources for this mega bridge project, we have our pennies in the pot. So that's what they did at the very last minute in the capital construction budget for the IBR. On jurisdictional transfer, which is incredibly important to a number of our communities here in Washington County, they basically pled, we're going broke as a state, just like the rest of us. And instead of passing any specific jurisdictional transfers and dedicating funds to those jurisdictional transfers, they set up a process that will be an advisory committee to ODOT that then advises what should be sent to the legislature to enact jurisdictional transfer, how that committee is going to be put in place, who's going to be on it. All of that's still up in the air. We are having those conversations with our partners as we're being asked, but there are a number of, we have done our homework here in the region about what should be looked at for purposes of jurisdictional transfer. And so we should be kind of at the head of the line once this advisory committee comes to the front. And then the final thing that's of major importance for local government in the state to coordinate is the state fund exchange through the Surface Transportation Block Grant Program. There was a long conversation. There's been a traditional program where we basically sell our federal funds to ODOT for less than $1 for dollar match, but it defederalizes our money, which therefore costs us less to manage the projects. And also we don't have to become federal project managers. So there's a cost savings. So that's the trade-off. The final bill set aside a certain amount of funding at ODOT that will be $1 for dollar fund exchange, and then continued the contracting process between ODOT, the Association of Oregon Counties, and the League of Oregon Cities. This was agreed by the state and those two associations on behalf of its constituent members, including all of the cities and counties on this call. So that was good news. It's a little bit of clarity, a little bit of surety, and a little bit of cost savings, but it is a limited resource as ODOT continues to talk about its overall budget challenges. The other thing that I just wanted to note, it's come up a couple of times in a couple of topics as far as a road user fee or road user charge in replacement or to make up for the gas tax losses. Did not get a discussion yet again this session. It is something that has been studied and put on the back burner for quite a number of years. Hopeful for the 2025 session, we'll start to realistically look at how we finance transportation. I think this tolling conversation in those intervening 2 years, plus the gas tax revenues changing as we further incentivize electric vehicles and make them more usable for more users. All of that's going to culminate in a really necessary conversation on the long-term scope of how transportation projects get paid for. We also heard reference in the previous conversation to a potential 2025 package. I will say that when I put on my paranoid skeptic lobbyist hat, she's real fun to wear. The conversation around tolling can have profound impacts on what that package looks for the metro region, depending upon how our partners feel that we have or have not met the expectations of the 2017 package as a region and where that blame gets laid. So we're being very mindful of that as we continue to have all of the tolling conversations and figure out what we as a region need to have from ODOT in order to be successful at building out the projects, specifically Rose Quarter and the Abernathy Bridge to start with, which is proving to be quite financially challenging for everyone. So on that super positive paranoid note, I'll go to the next slide. Housing and homelessness to totally change lanes, pun intended, was one of the top priorities for both chambers, both parties, the governor's office, pretty much every local government that walked in the door. And there was some really good momentum at the beginning of session with the House Bill 2001, which was the they called it the 60-day package, something they wanted to get out into the governor's desk within the first 60 days of the session. There are significant investments that were put forward to complement the governor's emergency order on homelessness. So there was funding included in that package, which was actually in House Bill 5019. House Bill 2001 really honed in on the process by which we plan for housing, known as housing production strategies. And instead of doing a housing needs analysis just as a city, it really switched how that's being done up to a state level process, which will then, the state will then tell each region as it deems, so the metro region will be one of them, they're gonna send back out to the local governments what their responsibilities are for types of housing, level, price points, to assess the overall need for housing and where it should be located, and evaluate the required housing production strategies with that lens in mind as cities put them and run them through the Department of Land Conservation and Development, or DLCD. One of the things that was highlighted in that conversation in House Bill 2001, however, was how the urban unincorporated areas work, which in Washington County is a pretty big deal. Our urban unincorporated areas, if they were incorporated into a single city, I believe would be the second largest city in the state. And it's pretty broad geographic representation abuts a number of cities that are on this call. So in the interim, we're going to be having a conversation with legislators minding the store about how those urban unincorporated areas also get subjected to the requirements for the development of the diversity of housing that's needed, and who's going to be responsible for that, and how anything that lands on the county's plate is not going to interfere with the work that the cities are doing within their own geographic boundaries and jurisdictional boundaries. But making the rub for everyone is that they pretend like we have infinite resources and infinite capacity at the local level, which we have clearly told them we do not. And so that transitions me into the next big thing I wanted to talk about. There were a couple of bills related to capacity that we didn't see much movement on. First, to relieve some of the capacity that was brought to our plates and kind of without a lot of love, I would say, from local government, obviously, and all of these things, every city and every county has its own opinion, and I'm trying not to paint my opinion into this presentation as much as I often do. But with the climate friendly and equitable communities rulemaking that just went through, the bill that would have basically sent the department back to the table to rewrite the rules did not move forward. There was some movement to that DLCD just upon its own action reopened some of that. I don't know how much foundational change that's going to make and how much capacity relief will come with that, but that conversation is at a rule advisory committee stage right now. The other bill was to literally just set aside a pot of money that would create technical assistance for housing and land use departments in trying to relieve, the burden at the local level by having a pool of technical people who could come in and do building permit reviews or to sit at our counters to literally do the work of planning agencies so that we can do the proper work from, green space to housing. And that bill, we were told, would be funded in other ways. And as other ways came and went, none of that funding really came through. So they really didn't address that need, which was expressly clarified by the Oregon State Economist's Office and seconded by DLCD in a number of different ways. that it, you know, we need a lot of people to do this work and we're not finding the resources to hire them, and they just aren't there in the state too. So there's a workforce issue, there's a resource issue, which then leads to a capacity issue. And then finally, House Bill 3414, again, one of those bills that has a variety of opinions around this table, but the bill did fundamentally three things. It would have regulated when and how we are required to permit variances to our clear and objective standards for housing development. It would have created the Housing Accountability and Production Office at the state government, which would have had further oversight about how we implement our local codes, both on the land use side, but also on the building official side, and would have been a place where people could have brought their grievances, or on its own could review our codes and deem them out of compliance and seek enforcement, seek recommendations to other folks to enter into enforcements against local governments, but also to serve as a technical assistance if we brought our own concerns to the table. The intention was to help local governments help themselves through their auditing process. And then finally, a new process for a one-off urban growth boundary expansion for specific to specific types of housing that would have been created. This is where the bill really, I think, it met its end at the end of session, with a number of people remaining absent on the floor of the Senate, which was the second chamber to hear the bill. It died, failing to have a majority with only 15 yes votes, one more vote, which meant one more person available to vote yes, and it would have passed. Therefore, I expect that bill to be coming back in the 2024 session, because it is the governor's priority. And we'll see if anything changes in the content of the bill in the meantime. Next slide. Finally, economic development had a couple of big things that I think have been expressed as high levels of importance to this county and the cities therein. The semiconductor work, we in Washington County, of course, are the home to Oregon Silicon Forest, and that is through intentional development, intentional work, and partnerships across many communities to see not just the one we all think of, Intel, but all of the constituent businesses that serve up to Intel and do a lot of the research and development that really creates an ecosystem within the semiconductor space. So Senate Bill 4 has assistance for companies seeking to pull down federal funding, and then also a power to the governor that is temporary to supersite industrial lands outside of urban growth boundaries and bring them into the urban growth boundary and then annex them in so that they can be made industrial ready for specific projects related to CHIPS Act funding. So some of the missing pieces, our partnership here in the region really looked at the regionally significant industrial sites program, which currently exists, that Business Oregon manages, which is to bring sites up to readiness. It's very cleverly named that way. And it needs funding and it needs reauthorization. And we got neither in this session. I think that was more oversight than accidental oversight, because there were too many pieces moving at the end and nobody thought to shove it in the last piece. And then the workforce investments, there is some money in the state's budget related to workforce development, because one of the things that the semiconductor world really does is it's advanced manufacturing, which has some economic mobility that is very profound and generational wealth creating for, you know, if we look at the statistics around the BIPOC community, there is a significant advantage to pulling down these jobs, but people need to have access to the programs to make them workforce ready to become the employees of these diverse sets of companies. So really wanted to see the state double down a little bit more on those workforce investments. The final piece that I'll mention related to semiconductor work is House Bill 2009. This had the SIP and gain share reforms. It created a state research and development tax credit, and then it made profound changes to enterprise zones while also extending their lives. I have in the back of my head information on how that tool got changed, but I am not a leading expert in that for once in my life. I didn't pay as much attention to all of the pieces because I really needed to buckle down on the SIP and gain share on behalf of the county. But that piece was also in there. It is an important tool. And those changes that were included in House Bill 2009 come into effect on September 25th of this year. So if you want to avoid these changes, act now, act quickly. Otherwise, be prepared to have to establish your enterprise zones with those new changes to the law. In particular, in enterprise zones, there is a change in how there is now a school fee that is attached that comes into effect as part of the lifespan of the enterprise zones, which is a direct payment to the school district that is impacted by property tax abatements. Finally, broadband, there was a lot of conversation about how we make ourselves ready as a state to pull down the full potential of federal funding that came through recent appropriations. And we got there in the end. It's looking and requiring that equity in the process, that it's not just the most rural areas, but it is every area that is underserved. How all of that shakes out in the rulemaking process, I'll leave to Mayor Rosner to explain to all of us, because it's his job now. But this is a good sign that that bill passed and it was thoughtful about all types of need. So next slide. This is just something I tell myself after every session. And as we go back and we continue to assess the impacts, investments, and mandates that came through the 2023 session, we will find a way to find a way. And we will all do this together as a region, as a county, as cities, as partners in this conversation. And we'll figure out what we need to fix, because they think they know what we do, but only we know what we do. Final slide, please. With that, I thank you, and I'm happy to answer questions, and I'll talk even faster if you have them. And we can take down the slideshow.
Thanks, Erin. Questions for Erin? Mayor Rosner.
Yeah, thank you, Erin. That was super helpful. And as always, appreciate your insights on all of this fun that we have in Salem. But I just wanted to add on the broadband thing. If you haven't heard, Oregon was allocated almost $700 million for broadband infrastructure by the BEAD program at the federal level. So there's going to be a lot of dollars out there. And so I encourage all of you to, there's going to be some good sessions at the OMA conference that I would highly recommend you attend to understand how you can take advantage of those funds for your communities. Because it's not all about just building your own network. There's ways you can partner with your current providers, et cetera, to make sure you're getting service in all the underserved and unserved areas within your communities. So just putting a plug out there. The broadband office is going through the work of designing those grant programs right now, working in concert with the FCC and NTIA. But there's a lot of money out there. Let's take advantage of it.
Mayor Callaway.
Thank you, Chair. And the chair requested questions, so I will phrase my comment in a question. Erin, do you realize how much we appreciate all of your incredible work down in Salem this session? Because we do. And secondly, do you know how much we hope you got a chance to get away in I guess, a little self-care, a little vacation, or a little something since the session finished? Because we really do appreciate all you did. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Here.
Thank you, Mayor Callaway. And to answer your question, yes, I ran away for a whole week with no internet access. So there.
Nice.
Anything else for Erin? All right. Thank you, Erin. Thank you for all your efforts on behalf of us down in Salem. Okay, that brings us to the ODOT summer construction update. This will be led by Stephanie Turner. Welcome, Stephanie.
Hi, yeah, thank you. I'm going to share my screen.
There's nothing's going on 217.
Nothing. Don't worry about 217, guys. Well, I will. Can you see my screen okay?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm going to run through the presentation, and on the 217 slide, I'm going to pop into the upcoming major closure that we're having. So this shouldn't take 20 minutes, and hopefully it's all just informational good news, but please ask any questions that you have. I am only going to go through the West Side projects, but the presentation I provided to Teresa also includes all of the projects in the metro area. So if you have any questions or want to follow up on those, contact information is provided in this presentation. So this is a 2023 summer construction project presentation that was presented to the ACT late last month. You guys are all familiar, everyone's familiar with the region. So I'm going to focus on the dark green area, which is the West Side. And for those who don't know me, I'm so sorry. My name is Stephanie Turner. I am the interim area manager West for ODOT. I recently stepped in for Matt Freitag. Probably should have covered that in the beginning, but you know. Again, my contact information. Okay, everyone's favorite project, the OR 217 Auxiliary Lane project. This is a quick review of what we're doing out there. So everyone knows that we're doing the auxiliary lanes, but in addition to that, there's a new frontage road from Allen to Denny. We're completing the north-south bike and pedestrian network by filling in the gaps around OR 217 to complete the Fano Creek Trail in this area. We're widening the Hall Boulevard overpass by Washington Square to include new sidewalks and bike lanes. And that was with the help of Beaverton and Washington County. And then we're also just building noise walls and doing ADA and other infrastructure in the area. Currently, the construction is showing through 2025. And then there's a lot of construction impact out there. So as you've seen, there's been nighttime lane and ramp closures, extended ramp closures, bridge closures, a whole bunch of different kinds of closures. And I know that our community outreach group has been really good about getting those out. And here is a perfect example of one that's coming up this Friday night. So we are reducing the northbound 217 lane from I-5 from the flyover to 99W down to 1 lane. And we're anticipating some really, really big impacts to the community. So we're trying to just inform as many people as we can to share with as many people that you know about this closure. Not only will this be super impactful, and we think especially along I-5 northbound, we're closing the OR 99W off-ramp from northbound 217 for the first weekend. That'll only be 1 weekend closure, but it will double down on some frustrations from the community. And so they'll have to go up to Greenberg and then divert back down on 217 southbound. For the entire 11 days, the 72nd on-ramp will be closed. So they'll have to divert up 72nd, down 99 by that Fred Meyer onto 217 northbound. This will go through next week, and then it'll reopen by the following Monday morning. So 11 days done by the end of July. That's the takeaway. Okay. In addition to that big closure, we also have some other projects that are going on in your area. The US 30, so this is St. Helens Boulevard between Kittredge and Bridge Avenue, is being repaved. We're doing a lot of ADA work out there, and we're doing some sliver widening to increase the bike lanes. And we have a lot of bikers that use that area. So this should go on through the end of the summer with single lane closures and just some T-part, like a temporary pedestrian detours. We're also replacing the traffic signals at Front Avenue and up at Bridge Avenue. We're adding a pedestrian crossing. I don't know how many people in this group use it, but there will be a pedestrian crossing to access TriMet as you walk down Bridge Ave from the St. John's Bridge. OR8 TV Highway. So this area is in Beaverton and Aloha. We're improving pedestrian connectivity and some traffic signals to reduce crashes at 8 intersections. So we're upgrading traffic signals and signs. We're upgrading the ADA ramps, and we're also installing a rapid flashing beacon. So the pedestrian activated crossing of OR 8 192nd. Many of you have probably seen that construction zone out there. So that will also increase pedestrian access across OR 8 to TriMet bus stops. This should be finishing up pretty soon. And we can continue to anticipate short-term lane and crosswalk closures, but it should be done by the end of the summer. The OR8 at East Lane in Cornelius project, another RRFB project, pedestrian crossing, just bid. We had a successful bidder, and this will go to construction later this summer, early fall, depending on when they can order equipment, and will go through next summer. So this will impact single lane closures and shoulder closures, if I can talk, of TV Highway in Cornelius. But good news, more pedestrian connectivity and access to transit and across OR8. Then everyone's second favorite project, the OR99W I-5 to McDonald project, which is this huge infrastructure project that's paving 99W, replacing the signal at Johnson, adding bike lanes at the north end of 99W, and filling in sidewalk gaps. So we should have a fully connected pedestrian and bicycle facilities from from I-5 down to McDonald. This has recently started construction this last spring. And you see a lot of TPAR, I keep on using TPARs, I'm so sorry. I recently hopped over from engineering into this role. And so I'm using a lot of acronyms I should not be using. So temporary pedestrian access routes, a lot of pedestrians being routed around the ADA ramp builds. We are gonna have short-term lane closures, longer closures, there'll be some freeway ramp closures, sidewalk closures as we're building that. You're just going to see different and variable closures, but the community is already feeling it, and I think we'll continue to feel it in different ways through the summer of 2024. And this project has been completed. It was just finished this last month. It's the Hall Boulevard ADA project, and that went from Locust Street up to Shoals Ferry in that Washington Square area. And it just installed 65 new curb ramps at 14 intersections. And just a small win for us. And I'm glad that we can say it's done, and there will no longer be traffic impacts. This isn't really in our area, but just additional ADA ramps being completed on US 30 up Lombard Street by I-5. So if you have any questions, let me know on this one. And again, there are additional projects in this presentation, and feel free to reach out to me or to Shelley or to Paul if you have questions or comments about any of those projects. And I'm happy to answer those. But with that, I am done with my presentation, and I will hold it up in case people have questions and want me to revisit any slides.
Looks like Mayor Lube has a question followed by Councilor Rosenthal.
Hi, thank you so much for being here. And thank you for the investments that we've been seeing down 99. Certainly as I drive by and see the new connections and the pretty new sidewalks being made, it's been great to see. I do want to discuss, and I know the Tigard staff have reached out, but the pedestrian redirections, quite frankly, have been pretty abysmal during the construction process, to the point where we've had pedestrians literally pointed into active traffic lanes and bus stops completely ignored, where people actually have to climb over different safety areas in order to get to the bus. And so if you could really work with, the construction crew, because, although we're improving the pedestrian roadway right now to get individuals through Tigard, it's been a really terrible situation for them.
No, I appreciate this comment, and I will reach back out to you with what I hear. If hopefully it's a positive and they have a plan in place to correct these things.
Great. Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you.
Councilor Rosenthal.
Thank you, Mayor. These are good projects. So thank you very much for the update. It provides some clarity. I just have one on a peripheral project. is the Rainier Bridge 8-week closure, which is going to cause, speaking of diversion, that's a major diversion. Is that going to cause, is that an ODOT or a WashDOT project or a joint project?
You know, I have not heard about this project.
The Rainier Bridge is going to be closed for 8 weeks to do some joints and to provide flexibility so it doesn't collapse. It's a 93-year-old bridge.
Sounds important to be completed. I can find out if it's a local agency project. I can reach out to Sam Hunady and see if he has any information. Do you have a specific question about it, or when it's going to take
Well,
place?
I was just wondering if it's an ODOT project or a joint project, and you know, and there is nothing you can do. I mean, if you're in Clatskanie or St. Helens, you're going to have to divert all the way down to Portland on Highway 30. It could impact the Highway 30 projects in North Portland.
Understood. Thank you.
Any other questions for Stephanie? Well, thank you for joining us today and being patient till we got to your subject.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. That brings us to the JPAC agenda. Mayor Callaway.
Thank you very much, Chair. So I'm kind of offering this on behalf of Commissioner Fye and myself. There's one action item, and that will be to adopt the 24-27 MTIP. And then, you know, which is ODOT's, and then legislative update will be, we'll receive one from Metro. We'll receive the draft findings of the regional freight delay and commodities movement study. Although freight delay and movement don't always go in the same sentence together. We'll get a transit-oriented development update. And then lastly, an update informational item on construction careers and pathway programs that are being, I guess, offered and looked into. And one comment not related to JPAC, but I just want to make sure if I can, I don't know, Chair, if I can make an original stuff, if that's okay with you. Otherwise, I can wait till we're done with the impact agenda review.
Let's do Tim. So just in case we were down the last 5 minutes. So Tim, you go, and then we'll shift it back to Mayor Callaway.
Sure. Excuse me, no problem. So the impact agenda is not published yet for the next meeting. But I do want to give you a quick update on our last meeting. There was a presentation on placemaking grants that Metro offers. They put out about $208,000 in grants this cycle. Washington County is extremely underrepresented in those grants. So take a look at that program. It's a pretty good program that you might be able to take advantage of in your cities in the next cycle. We had a presentation on transit-oriented development that was just more informational on where they're at with that in terms of building housing around transit areas, et cetera. And then we had quite a robust conversation around middle housing as it relates to the urban growth report. It mainly focused on making sure that's accurate. You know, we had a lot of conversations about different factors and how they're doing the analysis in terms of what housing needs are going to be related to that urban growth report. So, but that's about all I have for today. Mayor Callaway, you were there too. Did I leave anything out?
No, the only thing I was going to do is pat ourselves on the back because Commissioner Treese was there. You were there in person. I was there in person. Commissioner Rosenthal, Councilor Rosenthal was there in person. And so I think for the hybrid meeting for MPAC, the only people actually who were there might have been one other, and I'm going to embarrass myself by not remembering, but I think everybody from Washington County was there in person. And I think we were the only county that was so well represented.
Agreed.
Go back.
Go ahead.
I was going to say back to you, Mayor Callaway, for your additional comments.
Yes. So the comment I wanted to make, Chair, you know, we probably all saw in the news that PBOT is making $32 million in reductions. We know that at the county level, MSTIP had a 7% reduction. ODOT transferred $20 million from STIP into their operations. And so I just want to make sure aware of just how much has been diverted out of transportation budgets, and that we pay attention and make sure that others are aware, so that we can advocate for our county, for our cities, so that we can also protect the funds, because I worry that, and I'll just use Portland, for example, $32 million is being cut. Some of that might have been from planning. And so now is that going to be backfilled from other, just for example, for Metro? If so, then is that money that could have come to Washington County or some of our cities? So I just want to make sure we begin to look at all of the threads that are being pulled for transportation funding, and be protective of our interests as well.
Okay, good point. Looks like Councilor Rotel, you have your hand up.
Yes, I did. I just wanted to make a comment about the impact meetings and just encourage people. The next meeting is not going to be in person or combined. It's going to be a virtual meeting. It's the one in August. The one in September, we're hoping to have a combined meeting, but we would hope to have as many possible people as members as show up in person. And if you can tell us what you would need to be, what kind of invite you would need to do so, please let me know.
Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. Just a really quick wrap up here. I just wanted to remind folks we'll send out the ODOT presentation to everyone. We'll make sure that it's also linked to your agenda for today's meeting, so it'll be accessible there. And then we'll follow up with an email to all of our members too. Just a few things that we touched on earlier about looking at that future agendas topics. Please let us know if you have any suggestions or recommendations as we look forward. And then just a quick heads up, we are anticipating that in future agendas, we may also add RTAC committee updates to the and R1 Act to the sort of recurring list of regional committee meetings that we will just have a quick opportunity to check in near the end of our meetings.
Thank you. So we made up for being behind. We have 1 minute left. Anything hot and, well, I shouldn't say hot and burning. Sorry about that, Stephanie, but anything hot topic that we need to talk about before, or do we want to go? Now it's 2 o'clock, too late. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining today, and thanks for participating, and we'll see you next month.
Thank you all.
Thank you.